welcome to today's episode. We're interviewing a wonderful person, Jojan Jonker, and I'm already laughing speaking with him as we prepare this interview. He's a wonderful sense of humor and knowledge about Reiki. He became a Reiki Master and developed a particular interest in spirituality in general and mysticism. In 2010, he graduated in Interreligious Spirituality from the Radboud University in the Netherlands. He continued in 2011 as an external Ph.D. candidate as a both-sider, which is both a Reiki practitioner and academic scholar. In 2016, he finished his doctoral study on the migration of Reiki to the West. Jojan took on his doctoral degree in the field of religious studies. His research interests include Eastern traditions emerging in the West, spirituality, spiritual practices, complementary and alternative medicine, healing, and mysticism. Welcome, Jojan. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you, Nathalie, for the invitation. I really like it. I look forward to this conversation.
Me too. So we're going to start this interview the way I start every interview is the first time you came into contact with Reiki. How was that experience?
The first time I came in contact with Reiki, that was the first time when I heard about Reiki. That is, of course, the first time. And after that, you feel it. I think that's the normal order. It was in 1994, and I was at that time a consultant for a software house. And I started really early because I wanted to be there before the traffic jam started. So at 7 o'clock, I was sitting behind my desk. And there was a colleague from another software house who did the same. So we started very early, and 7:30 the others came in. So we didn't work. We talked about spirituality. So we were dressed up in our blue suits with our Samsonite cases next to us and our laptop opened, and we talked about spirituality.
That's an amazing image. Yeah, it's not what you will expect from people in suits.
Yeah, but it's the Netherlands, so you can imagine we are flexible. And it was a project where that hold 50 men and 0 women, and from the 50 men, 49 were in stress, and he never was. And he told me about Reiki, and it was something with the laying on of hands, and I thought it was a very woo-woo story, and I think, yeah, energy, blah blah blah. Yes, of course. But nevertheless, it went. That's how it went, day in, day out. And he also told a lot about Sai Baba. And, he and his wife were really devotees of Sai Baba. And in those days, he was a popular guru from India. He made his transition now, but nevertheless, he was always dressed in orange, and he had this afro hair cut, but it wasn't a man from India, but
Yeah.
it was a mixture of all kinds of things. But anyway, Reiki. And so I thought, my intuition said, well, maybe you should take a look at it. And at that time, my wife, now my ex-wife, she was a psychologist, and she had a colleague who was also a psychologist then. And that colleague told my ex-wife that she had become Reiki Master. And so my ex-wife thought, hey, that's interesting. And Jojan starts about Reiki, and she starts about Reiki. And so I thought, well, she's a psychologist, so there must be some sense or something from seriousness in it. So let's do it. And so in 1994, I took my Reiki 1 class, and after 5 minutes or something like that, oh, I skipped one step, and because indeed Carina Verhoeven told my ex-wife that she was Reiki Master, and she had what we call an information evening, so that you could hear. That's where people tell what Reiki is, so to inform people and to give the possibility to sign up for a Reiki class. And that was the first time that somebody put her hands on me and that I could really feel what happened. And I immediately felt it. Totally fell in love with the lady who gave me Reiki, of course, because that is not so easy,
It
not so
happens a
easy,
lot.
not so easy to distinguish. by the way, the second time the same thing happened, and the third time that I felt Reiki, it was from a man. I think, no, I'm not falling in love. I'm not falling in love with a man. It must be something else.
No,
So
but that's a good point. Like a lot of time we confuse that spiritual love that goes into Reiki with like physical love. Like it's
yeah,
happened to most of us, probably.
yes, yeah, it can be confusing. But maybe that is fusing is part of confusing. Maybe that's it. And
But that's a
so
beautiful take on it.
yeah, so it fused and then confused, something like that. But anyway, so that was for me reason enough to sign up for Reiki 1 class. And but when when she was giving, when she had started, after 5 minutes, I had a feeling that I was struck by something from BAM. I'm looking into my future. This is what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a Reiki master. Full stop. That's it. I saw my future.
I
So
love
I just followed the Reiki class, and I immediately wanted to sign up for the Reiki 2 class. And she said, no. That's in those days you had to wait 3 months. I said, okay, wait 3 months. And 3 months later, I was there again, of course. And she had her monthly gathering. So I was a devoted uh, person who came back every month for the Reiki exchange. And so it went. And after 3 months, it was Reiki 2. And I said, I want to become a Reiki master. As you know, yeah. But you have to at least have to be initiated for 3 years. Oh, 3 years. But we start sooner, I said. Okay, we start sooner. So after 2 years, we start our Reiki Master training so that I could become Reiki Master in about 3 years. And that was early 1998. And that was it, more or less. So it was, it, it suited me. It, yeah, it felt well, so to speak. And I could also combine it quite well with my work as ICT consultant. And in the first years, all my students were colleagues or from the company that had hired us. And
wow.
because now I was one of those 50 guys who didn't fell into stress and on project, and now other people started to think maybe it has something to do with that Reiki of him. So I wasn't really advertising, but Reiki became very soon a way of life, so to speak, and people picked it up and and wanted to follow a class. And that's how it, and it was a little bit uh, like a project from I gave classes in the weekend because our week ended on Friday, and then we said we see you tomorrow in the Reiki class. Yes, and it was Saturday, Sunday was the class, and on a Monday we were back in the office again. So I could immediately ask, and how was it?
Oh,
And there was one particular experience that was very nice to illustrate the transformation that people can experience, because it was a lady who wanted to do a Reiki class, and her issue was that she could not say no. And she worked at the help desk. And if you always say yes to everybody who comes to a help desk, you are overloaded constantly. So she was totally overloaded constantly. And she did a Reiki class. And the Monday after, the day after, I walked into her office and I said, and who was the Reiki class? And the light was dimmed, and she was burning incense and a candle. I said, oh, well, she took the atmosphere of the Reiki class into her office. But okay. And then somebody else came in, and he said, oh, how was the Reiki? Yeah, it was fine. And she wanted to say, okay. It was good. How about blah, 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 blah? And I saw suddenly a change in her eyes. And he said, can you do this and that and that? And I saw a change in her eyes. And she said, no.
oh, I love that.
And I was shocked. He was shocked. She was shocked of herself. And, but it was a beautiful example of how to witness the transformation that people can experience because of a Reiki. Normally, you don't see that. Normally, students go and they come back after a month and then they tell what they have experienced. But now it was, I saw it. I saw the transformation, and that was beautiful.
Beautiful. And also, I like that the example you choose is not this person who came very peaceful and like very hippie. she actually was centered and had clear boundaries, right? Like she was able to set boundaries. So I love that
Yeah,
example because a lot of times we think, oh, once I have Reiki, I will never get upset and I will never say no and everything will flow. No, you will be centered and know when to say no and when not to take toxic situations. I love that.
yeah, exactly. And when it is yes. That's also good to know. So it's much more clear for other people. From if you say yes, then it's yes, and they can count on it. And if you say no, then it's no, and we will come back on it later when it is when the time is right, something like that.
I
So
love
that was
that.
so
Yeah.
that was my start with Reiki and my Reiki mastery. And but already in the beginning, yeah, that is perhaps my academic mind because I had already a master degree in computer science, and but also my interest in Reiki because I was and still am interested in what is Reiki, why does it work the way it works. But I also immediately had questions about the story. For instance, in those days, the narrative that was shared also by my Reiki master is that it was Dr. Usui and Dr. Hayashi. And I already told a doctor, Ph.D., or what doctor, where did he study? What kind of Ph.D. did he get? Yeah, nobody knew. And but also that he in those days it was said that he was a teacher at a Christian school or Christian university, and I thought a Japanese man teaching in a Christian school that didn't know that much of Japan, but it didn't those things didn't make sense. There was something odd about it. But what also was odd for me is that Usui was the founder of a healing system, and the only testimonies we heard was that he came down from the mountain and that he hurt his toe and that he held his feet in his hands, and that in the restaurant that he helped the waitress and put her hands on. Well, I can do this if you have something, if you have a headache or something in your tooth, or and if you fall on the ground, you also pick your feet. So I was not really impressed by it, but those were the stories, and what was that special? And I thought, is that so special? And if he is the founder of a healing system, why are there no narratives from 2022 to 2026? Where are the crippled that suddenly start walking? Where are the blind that suddenly could see? Nothing. So I had questions, but there
I
was
love
no.
that. I believe the story. They told me the story. I'm like, okay. And I completely I didn't know very much about Japan. Now I realize how crazy it is. But when I didn't know anything. And then because it sounded so familiar, so Christian, it was, I think that's why I didn't question. It felt like any other, almost like a Bible story, right? This guy who suddenly gets this power and heals and that's it. So I love that you actually were able to question those things. Most of us, we just like, okay.
Yeah, but just imagine that it was not a Japanese man, but it was a Belgian man, and that he climbed up a mountain in the Ardennes, in the Belgian mountains.
No, then I doubt it because there are no mountains in their dance. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mount Karam is also not that high, but it is it so and he climbs on the Ardennes, and then after 21 days he comes down and said, I'm a healer, or I know how to do it. And then you hear nothing about it from 1922 to 1926.
I
So
would,
that's
yeah.
those were long-standing questions, so to speak. But in what you said, there was what I said, there was no other knowledge, and it was always if you asked something to Paul Mitchell or Phyllis Furumoto or the Takata Master, yeah, this is what Takata said because Takata said so, and so there was no room for discussion. And so you just had to let it go. But yeah, that was me. It was not enough. And also, I had some special experience that I could not explain, and it also put me on the path from what are we practicing, and maybe it's interesting to share if you
I
permit
would
me.
love for you to share those experiences so people have an idea of what you're expressing. Yeah.
Okay, it was what was it? I think somewhere I think 2000 or 2001 or something like that. There was a conference of the Reiki Alliance because I'm initially trained in Usui Ryoho, And I became a member of the Reiki Alliance. That is a group or an association explicitly for Reiki Masters of Usui Kriya Masters. And once a year they have a conference somewhere in the world. And we had a conference this time in Germany, and there was an auction because there was financial problems, blah blah blah. Doesn't matter. There was an auction, and all kinds of things were put on sale. Like one of the organizers had drink out of a cup from tea, and it was put on auction. Those kind of things. But there was also one serious thing. There was a treatment from 4 Takata masters. Rick Bogner, Wanya Twan, Shinobu Saito, and Paul Mitchell. And when they said it on day one, I thought, this is for me. This is for me. I must have it. I must have it. This is for me. And it would take place, I think, on day 5 or something like that. And so I had a meeting with my, in those days, wife, now ex-wife, what my budget would be for this. Because I asked left and right from, what are you going to offer for this treatment? Because it's very special. $50, 50 euros, maybe 100. I said, no, that's not enough. So meeting with my ex-wife by the phone. Okay, I had a budget of 500 euros.
Wow, that's a lot of money at a time.
Yes, not still it still is.
Yeah.
And the auction started, and it was 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And all my colleagues who I spoke with looked at me and said, there goes his budget. And there was one Reiki master, I think it was the Dutch Reiki master Fokker Rink I just mentioned, and he said, go for it. So it was already 700, 800, and there were only a few people left. And I stepped in again, 800 or something. I even forgot it because I went into a trance. I don't even remember it. And it was 900,000, and then there were 2 people left, an American lady and me. And what was told at me later, because we were with, I think, 120 people, they all were shouting and screaming, and there were people behind me drawing Reiki symbols and power symbols and go for it. I have no idea. I wasn't there. I was there, but I wasn't there. I wasn't there. It was completely in trance. So we went on and on and on and on, and it went up to 1600. And I thought I'm pissed off with this kind of, I go to 1,000, but I knew if I would do that, the American lady would say 3,000. So it would, so there was some sense in my head who said, don't do this. And the auction person who led the auction, she saw that this was it, this was the end. So she said, you know what? I asked those 4 Takatamas if they will both give you a treatment for $1,600. Yeah! I didn't close one eye that night, of course. And the next day we would receive this treatment, and this American lady went first, and she came out with handkerchiefs in her hands and her eyes red and totally in tears. And I thought, oh God, Jesus, this is going to be a total car crash with emotions. So let's do it. So I already put my handkerchiefs a little bit out of my pocket so that I could immediately pick them. But it was not necessary, because in just a matter of very soon, after just between 5 minutes or something, I noticed that I was going somewhere, and my mind came at a place where there was nothing, no emotion, no light, no nothing, just only the thought that I was thinking. And I knew that if I would let go this thought, it would be the end. That was it. And that brought me a little bit back. And after that, of course, we shared the 5 of us, the 4 Takata Masters, me, from what happened. And one of them said, well, we sensed what happened. And they said, you have been at a place where so many people long for, and you did it. And 2 years later, Wanya Twan came back to me on another conference of the Reiki Alliance, and she said, What you did was mastery on the element of money, because you were willing to pay an extremely lot of money for this treatment because you knew it would offer you something even before you got it, and you did it, and it offered you a lot. So, and those kind of experience were for me the trigger to make a study out of Reiki, because I just wanted to, because those kind of experience gave me the question, what am I practicing? As simple as that. And so I started questions left and right, from what do you think spirituality is? Well, I asked it to 10 colleagues and I got 20 different answers. This is not, this brings me nowhere. I was an academic, as I told you. So what, I buy a book. I buy a book, but there are not so many at those days. There were no academic books on Reiki. So where to start? And I said, well, through an event of coincidences, that is, I think, the path of Reiki that led me. This suddenly happened, that suddenly happened, and suddenly there was an information day for the Radboud University about the study Interreligious Spirituality, and I thought that, well, and I went to that, and I thought, this is for me. This is for me, and because they started, the first thing that they said is, well, in the landscape of religions and spirituality, there are a lot of truths, and we study them all, but we don't say which one is true.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is actually beautiful.
And I thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for: the non-biased and uh, non judgmental approach of the study of spirituality. This is what I need. So I started in 2007, and the plan was to write a master's thesis on mystical experiences of Reiki masters, and so I did. And I sent out a survey, and to Dutch Reiki masters. Yeah, then of course science steps in, and you have to be a control group, so it has to be Masters of Usui Ryoho because it's one style. It had to be Reiki masters from the Netherlands and Belgium, so it's one culture, and it had to be Reiki masters who are 10 years at least Reiki master, because Phyllis Furumoto had said, if you are 10 years a Reiki master, you will remain Reiki master for the rest of your life. So apparently you have reached a level of maturity that you will stay Reiki master. So those kind of, but anyway, I got something like 70 experiences shared with me. And I had because of the study, I knew what a mystical experience could be, so I used a model with 10 characteristics, and I matched them. And in those 70 experiences, I found over 200 occurrences of signs of mystical experiences. So that was for me really interesting, but also for my colleagues, of course, because I shared this with many people in presentations, but I felt I'm not done yet. This is not it. And my supervisor said, well, we would be interested if you continue with a PhD study on Reiki. And so I did. So I started in 2011. And we had a little bit from, okay, what will be the topic? And I thought that an interesting topic would be what if we could reconstruct the spirituality of Reiki in early Japan, early 1900, or the time of Usui, see what elements it held, and what happened with those elements during the migration from Japan through Takata to Hawaii, so to the United States, so to speak, to the West, and from there to the Netherlands. And it's quite distinctive periods, because it's 1922 up to 19, let's say 1940, until Takata learned in 1938 and brought it to Hawaii. And then after World War II, she really started to spread it in the United States and Canada, so the American continent, so to speak. And in 1980, it really spread worldwide. So it's three distinctive periods that you can really compare with each other. And so that is what I did. And indeed, it grew. It Normally, a doctoral study is perhaps 200, 300 pages, something like that. And when I had my first 300 pages, my supervisor and co-supervisor stopped, slow down, slow down. But they, over time, they noticed what I was doing and what I was trying to find out. And then there was some turning point that they said, you have to go home. Take a look at this and take a look at that. And because in a process of a doctoral study that normally takes 5 years, something like that, the first 2 years you have to read because you have to catch up with what is already there in academia. So you have to work faster than all the scholars that are already in the field.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then after 2 years you are more or less okay, we're there. And then you have to do the new thing. So the first 2 years, your supervisor is a supervisor, and then after 2 years, your supervisor becomes a colleague because you more or less know the same. You have the same level of knowledge. And then again after, so the last 1 or 2 years, you are the expert. So then your supervisor asks questions to you. Well, how about this? Or how about that? So that is for every PhD student, that is more or less very recognizable, I would say. Because at some point, when you have done your PhD, you are the expert in the field on that specific topic. And so they saw where I was going to, and then uh, they inspired me to go on and that became so this doctoral study, and
Right.
that is how it became 600 pages.
Wow. So what will be, because you said like they knew what I was going for. So what was the core that drove your studies? Like I know it's the comparing the three eras, but like, is there any findings that you would like to share? For example, one thing, for example, what are the components of Reiki that have stayed constant and will ensure it's still Reiki? And what areas do you think has evolved that it still can be considered Reiki?
Yeah, there are things. It is still considered Reiki because we practice Reiki as we call it.
Yeah.
So it is Reiki. And if you ask a modern Buddhist what he is doing and compare it with what the Buddha did, well, probably they're also. And if you compare what the Pope is doing or a bishop, and you compare it with what Jesus is doing, you think, it's slightly different what the Pope is doing, but still Christianity.
Yeah.
So things change per definition. And but there are a few things that remained the same. That is the laying on of hands, for instance, that remained the same. And the initiation, and although it was initially it was done during every event that you came together, with every gathering you received a reiju, as it was called. And later on in the West it transformed into that you receive the initiation during your Reiki 1 training or 4, and then during your Reiki 2 training. But that was a change. But in essence there's still a rite passage
Yeah.
to come from no Reiki to Reiki. That is still the same.
And
But
I'm gonna highlight because a lot of our viewers may not know that in like, and also in very Japanese traditional lineage, like offering attunements or initiation or reiju is okay, like you can get it anytime, right? Like it
yeah,
was like part of the tradition. So because I know sometimes people come to my circle and they're freaked out, like, why are you offering a reiju? I'm like, well, it used to be like that. We've changed it, but I think it's a great thing that you brought that to light to a lot of our listeners and viewers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's one specific interpretation of Reiju in English that I can appreciate, and that is blowing off the dust of your soul.
That's beautiful.
And that is what happens during your monthly gatherings. You just blow off the dust of the soul of your students.
That's probably one of the most beautiful descriptions I've heard of a reiju.
For me too. It's so down to earth, simple. Everybody understands it immediately, and I think that's what it is.
Oh,
It's
that's beautiful.
constantly polishing what is already there or something like this, and that it don't get dusty. So that's one change, from during every for in each gathering to only when you give a Reiki class. But another difference, for instance, is that when I'm trained in Usui Shikuryo, as I told you, But later on, I also took a training in Jikiden Reiki 1 and 2 with Tadao Yamaguchi, because that is a Reiki style that did not came to the West first and then back to Japan. So it originates from Japan, and he is Japanese, and I wanted to hear a teacher speaking in Japanese about the Reiki class, and that's why I took Jikiden Reiki 1 and 2. And one of the things that I learned there was that if you want to offer a distant treatment in Japan, you do not have to ask permission to that person. While in the West, that was an issue. You must have permission from, otherwise you are not allowed to send Reiki. Blah, blah, blah. And because in the West, the individualism, the individual is of more importance than the whole context. But in Japan, it is all about harmony in society. And if you notice that somebody needs Reiki, then apparently there's something going on. And because that of what is going on, the harmony may be disturbed by this person, and you don't want that. So you send him Reiki. Different culture.
And that is another great thing you're bringing, because I see a lot of fights on Facebook chats about like, you have to ask for permission, you don't. In my training, basically, you're like the sun, right? Like you shine, whoever wants to take it, takes it. If not, they go to a cave. Like it's not sending, it's not forcing it. It's just like being in a space of light and illuminating whoever wants. So I think also that is a great, so people understand is a cultural difference and also through time. I love that there is finally the explanation of why this is like that, right? And the confusion. So hopefully we're avoiding a bunch of Facebook fights with this.
I hope so. If you have more knowledge and insights in the cultural difference, then you also understand the difference between Reiki in Japan and Reiki in the West. And both are true, but it's just a different context. And also, of course, a different time, because Usui lived in 1922 and we live here in 2022. And if, for instance, if you um, look at the relevance of Reiki in physical healing, is in 1922, even antibiotics was not invented. So you got a disease from whatever you get ill. So that was constantly a threat. So of course people were glad that there was something like Reiki, Usui Reiki Ryoho, even if it wasn't Usui Reiki wasn't not primarily aiming at a physical healing. It was aiming a healing for the mind and the soul, and physical healing would follow. But nevertheless, it helped, especially Hayashi. He focused more on physical healing, and that made sense in those days. But in the West, if you now you have a headache, you take an aspirin, and if you have COVID, you get a vaccine or you get a booster. And that is we have a different medical context, so to speak. So I think my words, my vision, that the relevance for physical healing is nowadays in the West less than that it was in 1922 in Japan. I think that what in our world, what we need is healing of the mind. If you see what is going on in, take the United States with what happened with the Capitol, with the elections, and the state of the world of the mind. We get the woke culture, the cancel culture. It is. There are so many things that seem to get out of hand somehow. And I think that a lot of those crises that we have in our society is not about food. It is about mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that's my personal opinion, that the added value of Reiki should be of the mind, of the mindset.
I tend to agree with you. I was listening to a podcast before we just met now about how the trouble is we're every day more polarized, right? So I was thinking that's why Reiki is so good, because it's about remembering that we're distinct but together, right? So I was thinking that's why Reiki is like in my head works so well, because then I'm not taking an extreme position against you. It's not black and white. We can respect each other's truth and remember that interconnection. Like, if I cancel you, I'm canceling myself in a way. And that understanding, I think right now is missing. And you can see it. I cannot open the news in the States. Like every time I see the New York Times, like either now everybody can carry guns in New York City. Well, that's not what we need. What we need is people to relax and heal, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
not more guns, like in the subway with people who don't know how to shoot. Like but it's, as you say, I think that healing of the mind, the emotional body, the heart, like all of these things are very much in need. And I have never like thought about that either when I compare like Japan and today.
No. Yeah. But indeed, Japan. If we look at Japan in 1922, it was also a country in turmoil.
Yeah.
It was because we know the Second World War, 1940, 1945, but Japan was already engaged in all kinds of military activities from late 1800, early 1900 up to and include it it accumulated into World War II, and in 1945 it stopped. But
Yeah.
it didn't. It's so Usui in 1922 was already living in a period of many military conflicts because Japan had seen how these Western countries colonized, and Japan has no source materials like iron and coals, so they have to import everything into their country. So they decided, well, we can also have our colonies, and that's how they invaded Manchuria and tried to invade Korea and those. So it was constantly something going on. And there were riots in Japan in the 1920s,
Oh,
riots for food, and the palace of the emperor was under siege. So it wasn't really an easygoing, nice Japan that we often imagine from the everybody is in harmony. No way, Jose. It was a land in turmoil. And also financially, because there was a war industry, a war economy going on. That meant that 30% of the gross national income went into the war economy. And that is a lot. That is a lot of money for people, of course, because you cannot spend it on other things like food and education and whatsoever. So it's not without reason that Usui was not the only one who offered a healing system. He was one out of thousands. There were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people similar like Usui, and it just purely by accident that Usui survived and that his Reiki survived. And that's why we have this conversation today. But he was just one of many. He was not extraordinary, and for that reason, no, it was a matter of coincidence because Takata went to Japan and she brought it to. If Takata wouldn't have lived, we wouldn't have spoken about Reiki today. As simple as that. It would have
no,
faded away.
and if World War II will not happen, maybe he will not have become a Christian doctor, right? Like the context. I
Oh,
love
he
how
was.
you always explain like the context affects spirituality, right? So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your work on context and how it may affect the way we perceive these practices.
Um, well, I think that we live now in the West, so we should recognize a Western context. And for example, what we already touched on is that individualism is, yeah, very important in the West, whether you like it or not. So in case of this distant treatments, I most certainly am in favor of asking permission to people because that is how we do it in the West, and that is how I train my students, regardless that Yikiten Reiki does it in another way or that in Japan it is done in another way. I don't live in Japan, I live here. So different, yeah, different setting. And what we said, personally, I am more interested in healing of the mind and that Reiki becomes a way of life rather than that I focus on physical healing. If some person has physical problems, go to a doctor. They perform miracles, and if you see at the speed of development of within medical healthcare, that is amazing. I
Yeah.
think of this whole mRNA vaccine. Some people say that it's completely new, but it isn't. It was an idea. And it was an idea that was posted 15 years ago within academia in academic medical world. And they have been working on it for 15 years. And it was just ready. And they had, well, okay, now we have to wait for something happen so that we can try this mRNA vaccine. Bam, there was Corona. And,
There you
and
go. You needed it. There you go.
there
Yeah.
you go. And when the Chinese made public how this Corona thing looked like, Moderna and Pfizer, within 24 hours, they had developed the vaccine, and they only had to make it, and that took some, and to test it, and so that took a year. But they had it in no time.
Wow.
It's a miracle, and that is, yeah. I'm sorry, I like science. I'm really
It's
in
okay.
favor of
That's why
science.
I love to have a balance of people here. Like, I'm a nerd too, so I totally understand it. But I was thinking another thing that we often don't think, like, for example, sometimes people like, no, I can cure cancer with Reiki. Like they did it at Usui's clinic. But at that time, it was not like a session a week. Like when you will go sick to a place and go to like Usui's clinic, you will have constant care and offering of session. It wasn't. So we also kind of compare the way we offer sessions nowadays. Like 1 hour a week is not going to really give you what those people experience at the clinic.
No. And again, where are the testimonies?
Yeah.
Where are the testimonies of healing?
Takatas.
No. Where are the testimonies from Usui?
Yeah, no, but Takata from healing, but actually it's from Chihiro Hayashi as well.
Yeah. But and in those days, there was nothing else. Not much else. So yeah, it makes sense. But I'm really, if one of my students has something physical, I always urge them to go to a medical doctor, at least for a diagnose, so that they know what to what they say yes or no. And yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of times we see Reiki more as a complementary to empower the healing than just replacement as well. Sometimes we get confused. So I wanted to also go, so for you, what I feel like a little bit like Reiki give you this beautiful clarity from the beginning, right? So what other gift or what other transformation have you had from Reiki practice in your life?
Well, I think accept life as it is, more or less, to what some call anshin ritsume, that you do your purpose in life with a calm mind. And I think that I'm doing that, and so I'm not just living day by day and let's see, it's all about pleasure and that's it. But I think I want to, because I realize that, for instance, before my academic study is a lot of things have to come together. Yeah, you have to have some intelligence. Well, there are enough people who have it, but you have endurance. You must continue for
Oh,
4 years. You have to, it can be lonely, because there comes a point that you cannot speak with anybody what you're doing, because you're the only one who has the knowledge of it. And yeah, that's, and so you must have a partner who appreciates it every night. You're sitting in your study room instead of the living room, and having fun with her. So, and that has to come together. And I think that gives me a responsibility for the Reiki community to share these things and to be there if there are questions. And that is my purpose. And I think that for me, that is a purpose in life. And I love doing it. I love it. This is my path. And I really hope that when I close my eyes for the final time, that I leave the world in a better condition than when I came to the world, so to speak, that I've contributed something. That's my goal. Well, maybe it's ambitious, maybe it's not you, but that's my goal. That's my intention. Let's put it that way.
But it's a beautiful intention. I think you said two things I love. First, accepting things as they are. Like we often see Reiki practice as a manifestation tool, or nothing bad will happen. And what it gives you is that beautiful centering and to just see things with a little bit more clarity and less attachment. And then the other thing, like at the end, that's the goal, right? Through the precepts, be happier and bring a little bit of that peace around us. And if we all had a practice like that, then we will not be so polarized as well, right? It's and another thing that you mentioned at the beginning, and it was from the studies, there are many truths, right?
And we study them all.
And I think for me, Reiki practice has allowed me, like, okay, there are many truths. And my truth, like the more I practice, the less attached to it is, the more tenuous it feels. So I don't know if you want to like talk a little bit about those many truths in Reiki.
Yeah, there are many truths of Reiki, because when I did the Usui Shikuryoho Reiki class, it was different from the Jikiden Reiki class, and both are true. But it differs.
Yeah.
And when Phyllis Furimoto developed her Reiki style into the 9 elements and 4 aspects, as it is called, maybe you've heard the term. Yeah, that was her truth. That was what she had to offer. And Tadao Yamaguchi offers Reiki in a different way, and they're both true. So, and that's what, by the way, one of the reasons that I recently let go the Usui Shikri Ryoho part, and I consider myself now as Reiki Master in Reiki. So not Reiki in this or Reiki in that, or the Jojan Jonker Reiki, but just Reiki. And so that it is no longer affiliated to any of the current styles, and just bring it back to the center. And I give Reiki classes.
And it's letting go of labels as well, right? And again, sometimes they're different, they're all valid, and let's not fight about it. You know, there is, but I love like there is actually a background, like in your case, you have the historical and philosophical understanding of these differences that helps a lot. And I ask every person one question is a teachable lesson. So obviously you've been practicing for years and you've been very committed, right? Both for like the academic side and the practice side. So is there a teachable lesson, like something that actually was an oops, but you end up like, oh my God, this was the biggest gift of my life that I did this mistake?
Well, the biggest gift, but it was a gift. This oops moment. I just had Reiki, I think, for 1 or 2 years or something like that, and I was very enthusiastic, and I wanted to share it with everybody, all my friends and fake friends, and everybody who were new in the street. So we were visiting friends, and I was blah 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 again, talking about Reiki, very enthusiastic. And I said, "You have to try it. You must sit on the seat, and I will give you Reiki." And she clearly didn't want it, and I clearly wanted her to sit on the chair. So in the end, she took. But my partner at the time, who was sitting opposite of this woman, she saw that she was sitting like this, and I was giving Reiki on behind her with her hands on the shoulder, and so I couldn't see her face. But what I did feel is that the energy or whatever, what I was trying to pass on through my hands didn't enter her body. So it became what I call a cloud of Reiki on my hands. And it almost felt as they were heavy, as I was lifting a weight, because it wasn't flowing into her. It was still around my hands. It was a strange experience, and it was, for me, it was a lesson. Don't push it. Let people decide for themselves if they want Reiki, and if they don't want it, no, then they don't want it. Full stop. That's it. So so the evangelism stopped there.
I love that, because I think when we take our first Reiki class, we're all so excited. Like, I think I tried with my family. It was the biggest disappointment, because not only did they didn't want it, they didn't feel it. They call it like witchcraft. So it makes you to feel very insecure. It's like, this is not working. So I love that you reached that, because even though we're excited about it, other people may not. And that is lovely, because I'm sure we're gonna get comments of like, that happened to me as well. And then I know you told me you're both sider, right? So you're a practitioner on one side and you're an academic on the other side. And I had never heard that description and I like it. But if there is one tip that you can give from your academic background to improve people's practice, everyday practice, what would that tip be?
One tip. If you practice, don't ask yourself questions about if it does exist, if it is right or wrong, if there is an energy or not. Just do it. If you practice, um, the term the term both-sided, by the way, that is something that my supervisor and I came up with, because I'm a schooler and a practitioner. And when you are a schooler, you must let go, not be biased by the practice.
Yeah.
That's it. But if you are a practitioner, you should not be biased by knowledge. And I think that is what I often say to people. If you step in, if you practice, step in the practice, and don't discuss what you're doing. Just do it. And if you step out, then we can discuss it again, but not during practice. And that is what I also like of Reiki gatherings. Then it's mouth closed, on the table, and receive Reiki. That's it. Back to the basic. And that's what I like. I always like to go back to that basic. Even if I can, as an academic, or as a schooler, can ask myself, is it energy or not? Or is it, that doesn't matter. When I'm laying on the table, I experience it and I like it.
I think that is an amazing piece of advice. And we overthink everything, especially I think also when you have a quick training, you're so full of doubt. So I think that is a beautiful piece of advice for everybody from the beginning to the end of your journey. And I really appreciate that, because sometimes I'm like, it's funny, like now I have the voice, I just let it be, right? When are you gonna do a ritual? Today you didn't drink enough water. Is this work? And like you learn to leave it aside, right? Like, but stepping into that space and letting go of the thinking part, I think it's beautiful. And it ties beautiful.
I want to add something, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Dory Beeler, the other schooler I
Yeah.
told you about, she did also a PhD on Reiki, but she did a Reiki Master training with me. And because she wanted to become a Reiki Master, she said, who on earth can be my Reiki Master? So she came to me. We are very dear friends, I must say. And what we did is, when we talked about Reiki, and sometimes we had a question on her Reiki mastery path, and we didn't find the answer like that. And then what we often did then is, okay, we don't find it on this level. Tonight at 9 o'clock, since 10 o'clock, my time, your time, at the same time, we sent Reiki at the same time to this topic. And then we try to touch it from that perspective. And then the next time we talk about it. And so we in a way, we stepped in and we stepped out together. And that was amazing. But when the day came that she had to receive her master initiation, we already knew at that time that it was invented by Takata. So in principle, you don't need one. It's about the training and not. But nevertheless, we're still within Usushi Jojans in those days. So there had to be a master initiation. So I had to give her a master initiation. So we were a little bit, walking around the hot pot, as we say in the Netherlands, from what to do. But then we did it. And the moment so we said, okay, we step in both. You step in, I step in. We now do master initiation. And it was the most emotional, beautiful experience we had together. It was astonishing. I was completely the Reiki master. She was completely the master initiate, the master candidate. And it was complete magic. It was complete magic. And it was fantastic. And that is how we did it. And I think that was, for me, if you interview her, you can also ask it. But for me, it was an amazing moment.
That's beautiful. I was reading a book from Franco Satesky, The Five Invitation, and he describes this emptiness, right? This interconnectedness as intimacy. that deep intimacy, like, and I'm thinking of what you say and this encounter of the soul. So when you're describing that description of him, of interconnectedness as intimacy, really came to mind in a beautiful way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think sometimes it's like, oh, we become one, is very heady, right? But like deep intimacy without boundaries, I think that is a little bit clear of what sometimes we experience. I have another question because you mentioned this, and that may also be something our viewers, listeners may be interested. And this is my last question. So you mentioned that the initiation was created by Takata. Can you tell us a
The
little?
master initiation.
The master initiation. Okay. So can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as far as we know today, is that Usui initially had created his Usui Reiki Ryoho in 1922, and in 1923 there was this great Kanto earthquake, and he realized that that is what we think happened. He realized that there were more people needed who could give Reiki, perform Reiki treatments, and we think that that was for him the trigger to to develop a rite passage, an initiation from no Reiki to Reiki, and he called it Reiju. And this Reiju is based on at least Buddhism, esoteric Buddhism from the Kanjo ritual that is a specific family of rituals for initiations. And on the other hand, I think that was one of my conclusions in doctoral study, that it is also based on the Shinto ritual, Shingon Kishin. And because in Shingon Kishin, that also is a family of rituals, and there's one ritual in particular where there is a master, a student, and a third party, the energy. And my experience is when I give a Reiki initiation, that I start the initiation, I do the procedure, I do the procedure, I do the procedure, I do the procedure, and at some point, something takes over. And then it's not I give the initiation, but an initiation takes place. And for me, that is the moment that there is not a two-party, but a three-party relationship between the master, the student, and the energy, so to speak, as if it is an entity, not a commodity, an entity. And that is for me so the mystical part of Reiki that takes place. And in Shinto, in Shingon Kishin in particular, you can recognize it. So Usui had created this ritual, and every time that when people came to his gatherings, they received this ritual. And the same happened with Hayashi, because you can see that in Jikiden Reiki, that is based on Hayashi Reiki, so to speak. And when Takata came to the West, somehow it evolved into 4 initiations for Reiki 1 class. But probably it had to do with that the Reiki 1 class hold it 4 day parts. Because there were 4 day parts, and so there were 4 initiations. As easy as that. And because Takata was traveling around and there were students from coming all over the place, there were no monthly gatherings as Hayashi had and as Usui had. So it people experienced it from I do a Reiki class, I receive 4 initiations, and that's it.
Oh.
And then they went out, they flew out back to Canada or whatever. And the same was it with Reiki 2. There was no Reiki 2 initiation because it was just a continuation of a training. And for instance, Jikiden Reiki is often given back to back, Reiki 1 and 2. Right? In 5 days, it totally flows over into each other. And every day you receive this Reiju, so it just continues. And when Takata gave classes with Hayashi on Hawaii, it also was back to back. It was all still one training. And later it got more separated, and that was, of course, perhaps even the gift of Takata, that she noticed, because thanks to her experience, that that it was not such a bad idea that people first practice with Reiki and then do a Reiki 2 then follow a Reiki 2 class. So there's nothing wrong with that in itself. And but they received initiation, and that ritual changed a little bit. The symbols got involved, those kinds of things. So the procedure changed a little bit. And the same happened with the master initiation. Takata trained, most people think 22 masters, but there are at least 23 and perhaps even more. But going back to this 22, the first 9, they were all acknowledged as master. Let there be no misunderstanding about it. But the first 9 did not receive a master initiation. And then there were 6 who did receive a master initiation. And then there were 4 who did not receive a master initiation. And then there were the 3 last ones who did receive a master initiation. So she was alternating with, this my personal interpretation, is that she was experimenting, or somehow felt that the one needed it and the other not. Or we don't know, because nobody asked. That is the problem, because those 22 didn't, those who did not get the master initiation didn't know that there were others who did get the master initiation, and vice versa. So, but it came into existence in the time of the Takata, that is for sure. And now it is what it is. And what Phyllis, Phyllis, being the successor of the Takata, or at least acknowledged successor of the Takata, in my opinion, started to emphasize the master initiation more and more. And at some point, it was even so that you had to pay your $10,000 not for the master training, but for the master initiation. And that was, of course, new, because Takata would never have done that. So there you see a change in how this master initiation evolved and became a commodity in itself. And the backside of it, the downside, and that was, of course, never the intention of Phyllis, is that people started to believe that you must receive a master initiation to become master. And so there became a market for it. Oh, you want to become a Reiki Master? I can give you a master initiation for €100, and then you are a Reiki Master. So because the emphasis shifted towards the master initiation, for some people, the training got less emphasized. Not within the Usui-Kyo. There it is still very traditional, that it is a solid training that can take years, and then you receive the master initiation as a final touch of it, or something like that. But outside that, in the Reiki world worldwide, yeah, it has become a product. And
I've been offered initiation for $40.
And it works.
It happens, like, yeah, and the master is like a little more expensive, $100 without any training. Like they say I'm selling, like they are literally giving you the attunement and a manual, like that's it.
Yeah, that's it. But I don't judge that. I see it happen. I see it as a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And and of course you can ask yourself, is there a difference between a Reiki Master who has received a training of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years versus somebody who's kicked out the door with an initiation and a handbook? Of course there's a difference. But I also realized that we as Western society also grow in our spirituality, and especially a lot of those people, they may have already learned a lot and have studied a lot about Buddhism and Japanese, I don't know what. And so maybe for them, it just fits in what they already know. So I don't judge it. I just observe it. And it wasn't my path. And it is not a path that I offer to people. But it doesn't mean that the other path is wrong. It is just there. It is just there.
Yeah, and it may always be like also a way to start a practice, like I started with really bad training, and then because of that, it actually imposed my good training. So maybe just an attunement gives you that spark, as you had it, that clarity, hey, I want to do this for life, and then you go deeper into it. And what I love is that you actually explain a little bit, because sometimes we start, again, discussing these things without the background, right? And we go nowhere. So it's interesting to understand what caused that shift towards the attunement. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And if you have more questions, I'm available now.
So my last question is like for people who want to reach out where you are, all your information, I will put the links, obviously. And if there is any other resource beyond your website that you want to share, feel free to do so now. And then I'll give you a drawing.
My website is www.jojan.nl.
Perfect. And I'll spell it there. So everybody who has a question or wants to train with you, especially if they're in Europe, please do so. And like the Netherlands have like so many great like Reiki teachers. It's amazing. It's like per capita. So I did a drawing for you, and my drawing was inspired by two things. The both sides are both of East and West, and academic and practice. So I do paint mostly women, so sorry about that. So basically, I do everything gold and silver for non-duality. And from this very grounded practice comes, it's from the earth to the heaven, but also there is the script of the academic and is the binary code, which is funny. I forgot you actually were in computers. So the binary code coming together, so the duality and non-duality together.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then this is a mix of probably the Virgin Halo from Western with the three elements Sanmitsu of Japanese practice.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Did you paint that yourself?
Yeah, I do all my drawings. For every interview, I do a drawing based on the person.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, I like it.
And you will receive it by mail. I'll send it to you. I'll confirm the address and you will get this. So this is your drawing. And yeah, that's the meaning of it.
Well, I just wanted to say it's a compliment, but I don't know if it is a compliment, but I like it. I like it. I like what you said about non-duality. That is what I hope to transmit, and that there is a way to practice Reiki in a non-dual way, in non-dual way, in a way of harmony, in oneness.
I think you said it, when there are many truths and no truth is the truth. I think that for me is the key for us to practice in harmony. So I really appreciate this interview. And yes, I forgot completely the part about the computer science. I used to draw a lot of binary symbols like years ago, and this is the first time I include in one of my drawings. And now like, oh, that's why, because it stays in my mind. So when I do the drawing, it's not even a compliment. I feel like after we did the interview, I just go and draw. Right. So it's just like that. So I'm glad you like it, and I'll send it to you. You should get there in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, most of the drawings have made it okay to Europe. So that's the good news.
Wow. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, amazing research. And what I love, like, it really is research that actually can inspire us to go deeper into the practice, right? Knowing the context, allowing us to be more flexible as well and less judgmental. So I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people will do. If you're listening or watching again, you can reach out for Jojan. I'll put the website. I can connect you if needed, you have any questions. And if you're really, really into academic reading, he has a wonderful thesis of 600 pages. So that sometimes he shares if you're nice to him. So thank you so much, Jojan, and I'll keep in touch. Besos.
Okay. Bye-bye.